It all kicks off in a dark, rainy forest on one seriously spooky night. And in the middle of all this darkness, a group of heavily armed knights pushes through the woods. They finally find their target, and the leader asks if he had fun hiding. Right after that, he lays into our protagonist, calling him a filthy beast. He also says that tricking the holy knights was a neat trick, but his act ends right there. Then, the knight raises his sword and tells our hero he should feel proud to be taken out by him. Even though he's down, the vampire isn't fazed by the talk about his sins and the church, but with a smirk on his face, the knight gets ready to spill a secret. Turns out, he never wanted to capture our boy and let him run loose on purpose. He explains that he joined the chase late and let him run wild all this time, because our hero was a rare vampire, and the knight wanted to make a name for himself by capturing him. Our protagonist then realizes this world is a jungle where the strong prey on the weak. Since everything is determined by power, he's always been on the run from everyone. However, his attempt to fight and flee is useless, and he gets hit head on. The knight's blade runs him through as he remembers being hunted down and cornered. And even so, the knight keeps yapping about how his very existence is an insult to the church. But in his final moments, our boy wishes for a second chance to change everything. With that, he lets out one last cry of agony as his life completely fades away. Suddenly, our protagonist wakes up, startled, in a totally different place. He then looks around, breaking out in a cold sweat, wondering what the heck just happened. He then looks down at his hands and realizes his limbs and his neck are all in one piece. On top of that, he notices he's in the same tent he lived in before being hunted by the knights. Seeing the marks on the wood, he figures out he's gone back 6 months into the past. With this, our protagonist finally gets it somehow. He's traveled back in time. He then clenches his fist tightly, knowing he's been given a second shot at life. From there, he explains that he used to live in an isolated village in the forest, far from human eyes. Back then, he was just a weak vampire named Eugene who lived by hiding and surviving, until one day, he gave in to his instincts, which brought mercenaries and knights after him. And no matter how much time passed, they always found him, no matter where he went. Because of that, and terrified of getting caught, he spent 12 years drinking nothing but the blood of wild beasts. Now, back in the past, he has no idea how it all happened, but decides he won't mess up again. Eugene then decides he's going to get strong enough that no one can ever take him down. So, our hero heads to a swamp and declares he's going to change his survival strategy, because vampires absorb power from blood, and the stronger the blood, the more power they gain. And with that idea in mind, he waits until his first target finally shows up. Suddenly, the master of the forest, a giant, terrifying creature, leaps right at him. Even with the monster right in front of him, Eugene shows no fear and gets ready to fight. The beast attacks with spikes, and our boy is sent flying from the impact. He knows his body is weak, but if he can just get one small cut, that's all he needs. Because then he can suck the creature's blood and finally start getting stronger. Eugene then leaps toward the monster because his old survival method was a bust. And now that his old tactic failed, he desperately needs more power. So, our hero uses his sword and attacks the creature with all his might. However, he's shocked to find that his blade couldn't even pierce the beast's hide. The monster then strikes back with a tail whip that shatters his sword and sends him flying. The creature then slams its tail on the ground, launching our protagonist into the air. Eugene hits the ground, all banged up, and realizes he might have underestimated his opponent. And right in front of him, the master of the forest opens its mouth to devour him in one bite. Turns out, this creature is a roamer, a monster that lives in magical realms. On top of that, some of them have magic stones that are treated like rare jewels. Our hero knows the stone is the beast's core, but the power difference is just too huge. He then realizes that maybe he took this new lease on life a little too lightly, because the monster is so strong it could finish him off before he could even land a scratch. The creature then attacks with everything it's got, creating a massive wave of energy in the swamp. Eugene then thinks that because he got one second chance, he figured another would come easily. However, he doesn't overestimate himself and knows he can't make the same mistake as before. That's why he always crawled and held his breath just to stay alive. And even now, he keeps fighting just to survive one more day. But this time, he's chosen to fight with all his strength just to keep on living. So he grabs the monster's mouth with his bare hands and decides he's going to fight and win. With his body glowing, our hero knows that if he doesn't win, there won't be another chance. So he shoves his hand into the monster's mouth to rip out its power core. Because for Eugene, survival is always built on the blood of others, and with one final effort, he finally manages to crush the creature's mana stone. After the battle, the night becomes calm and quiet in the forest once more. Suddenly, a huge explosion of energy lights up the entire swamp. He then remembers vowing that, if he got another chance, he would choose to fight, and not follow the path of running away, like he did his entire past life. Now, standing amidst the wreckage, our boy has completely transformed. With a brand new look, he declares that he will conquer both blood and victory. A moment later, our protagonist stands alone under the moonlight. He realizes that the mana from the stone was way stronger than he imagined. On top of that, he's gained the ability to cover his skin in black scales. Eugene then reveals that he found out about the monster when he was captured by mercenaries. Back then, he drank the creature's blood and managed to escape from there. But even with his new power, he knows he's no match for the knight, Jung Dorit. That's why he needs to get stronger to fight the paladins who will come after him. Seeing that the sun is about to rise, our hero decides to head back before dawn. However, a mysterious voice stops him, thanking him for taking out the false master. And from the swamp waters, a blue creature emerges, thanking our protagonist. However, the creature says that invading its home and staining the land with blood is a sin. It then introduces itself as the Great Mirian, the protector of that territory, and even threatens our hero with a curse that will tear his body to pieces. But the creature reveals itself to be a tiny fairy and wonders if he can even hear her. The fairy is then shocked when our protagonist asks what she is. She can't believe he can see her, and Eugene repeats the question one more time. The little creature asks if he heard everything, and he confirms that he did. She then introduces herself as Marianne, a water spirit who was enslaved for 15 years. But she explains that it's thanks to him that the place can finally be purified again. While Marianne is talking, our boy notices that one of his tattoos is fading away. The fairy then asks about the mark, and he says he doesn't know, that it's always been there. He also reveals that ever since his earliest memories, he's had 10 tattoos on his body. Since he doesn't remember his past, he just focused on surviving quietly. He then wonders if the marks are some kind of seal, and if one of them just broke. Marianne starts to panic, as it's been a long time since she's talked to anyone. She then complains that purifying the swamp and turning it back into a lake is going to take a while. So she offers to serve him fresh water as a way of saying thanks. But the water she produces doesn't look the least bit appetizing or clean. And despite the fairy's insistence, our hero tells her to take a hike and ignores the offer. A few days later, our protagonist finally arrives at a village called Broadwin. Suddenly, a young man runs into the village shouting that the red-eyed monster has arrived. The chief and the other villagers come out to see and are shocked by the scene, because on the ground, they find a huge pile of animals that were recently hunted. A young man then asks what the monster is planning, since it's not a full moon. Turns out, Monster is our hero who has lived near the village for over 10 years. Suddenly, our protagonist steps out of the forest and asks if he can enter the village. At first, everyone was afraid of him because of his scary red eyes. But since he always brought food, their strange relationship continued for a decade. Our boy then explains that he lived far away because he was sick, but now he's all better. And since he received so much help from the village, he'd like to repay all their kindness. The villagers are confused as he tells them to call him if anything happens. He then takes off his mask and reveals himself to everyone with a smile. The crowd is in shock, completely frozen by our protagonist's good looks. They wonder if the creature was actually a half-elf, or maybe even a noble. Even the village chief can't believe he was that handsome under the mask. Back in the forest, Miriam asks why he gave all the game to the villagers. She doesn't get it, because to a fairy, vampires are all about blood and demise. Miriam also complains that he doesn't need humans, since he's leaving soon anyway. Eugene then replies that sometimes you have to care about these things, because if he doesn't stop them, mercenaries are going to invade, and everyone in the village will be done for. He then explains that the mercenaries are coming to take a boy from the village, and in the process, they're going to wipe out all the witnesses and take out all the villagers. Marianne is confused and wonders if he's telling the truth and how he knows all this. Even after days together, she still can't read his thoughts. The fairy then asks what trust has to do with the mercenaries. Suddenly, our hero stops walking, and Marianne bumps right into his shoulder. She complains about the sudden stop and asks why he stopped out of nowhere. It's then that she looks ahead and sees what's going on. A group of mercenaries armed to the teeth appears on the forest road. They see our protagonist alone and think he's just some villager. The leader then comments that the guy looks frail and isn't well armed, so he orders his men to take him out without making a sound. With that, one of the mercenaries charges forward with an axe to attack our hero. Marianne screams in desperation, terrified of what might happen to him. The man then swings his axe, but our boy is much faster. With a cold look and his eyes glowing red, he gets ready to strike back. In the blink of an eye, he cuts the mercenary in two without any trouble, and while the rest of the group is in shock, he explains his tactic to Marianne. Our hero says they need to build trust so they don't look suspicious. And with that, he reveals he's going to take out all the mercenaries right then and there. Eugene then continues to explain his plan to the little fairy, Marianne. He says he needs to build the humans' trust without seeming suspicious. And with a smile, he reveals he's going to do that by taking out all the mercenaries. The men then scream in terror as they realize our hero is a vampire. However, one of them musters up some courage and says if they capture him alive, the church will give them a reward. But his greed doesn't last long, as our protagonist glares at him with his red eyes. The mercenary is sent flying, and the others realize he's not just some ordinary guy. Even so, they keep attacking, and one of them yells that the vampire's head is his. However, our hero is way too fast and manages to dodge all their attacks. Then a huge brute with a massive mace charges at our boy. The man yells that he's going to flatten them all with his super powerful weapon, but he's shocked when our protagonist blocks the attack with just one hand. Eugene then says the day is getting dark, and the night is his time to shine. He then uses his claws and finishes off the mercenary in a single blow. He takes advantage of the darkness and says that night is the best time to draw blood. The group's leader then yells for his men not to attack blindly, because he's a monster. Suddenly, the villagers arrive with torches and are horrified by the scene. They can't believe the bloodbath they found in the middle of the forest. The village chief then looks at the scattered bodies and wonders how this happened. Suspicious, he glares at our hero and asks if he was the one who did this. However, our hero denies everything and says he found the bodies on his way back from hunting. He then points to the side and says the culprits are some other guys, and to everyone's surprise, the culprits are a pack of dire wolves. Our boy explains that he took out a few wolves, but the ones that got away might still be around. One of the villagers then confirms that there are claw marks on the mercenaries' bodies. Another man also yells that they were all attacked by a pack of wolves. The chief then apologizes to our hero for suspecting him for no reason. He then suggests burying the bodies in the village, but Marianne calls him a liar because the wolves only showed up to clean up the mess after smelling everything, and that he made the marks on the bodies himself to cover his tracks. The fairy then wonders why he cares so much about his image with the humans. Suddenly, our protagonist finds something in the pocket of one of the dead mercenaries. He then hands a letter to the chief and asks if he'd like to give it a read. The man recognizes the seal of Lord Taiwan and is shocked by what's written inside. With wide eyes, he can't believe what he just read. Desperate, he shouts the name Pelid and asks if the boy is in the village right now. Turns out, Pelid might be the illegitimate son of the powerful Lord Taiwan. Our hero then remembers the mercenary leader's words about the boy. The man was surprised by Eugene's strength and wondered where he came from. But our protagonist didn't give him time to think and went all out on him. Even so, the mercenary leader yells for his men not to hesitate and to fight. He says that even if our hero is a monster, he still has 2 arms and 2 legs. But the man soon realizes they can't even run from the vampire, so he decides to attack himself and charges full speed at our protagonist. With a cold, determined look, our hero prepares for the final showdown. He then lands a powerful punch right in the mercenary leader's face, and with the force of the blow, the man is sent flying into a tree. Our boy then kicks the mercenary away, ending the fight. The leader then begs him to stop, as he can't take any more of a beating. Lying on the ground, he asks if our hero was waiting for them from the start. The man says they just had business in the village and didn't want any trouble. However, our protagonist declares that the village is his and wants to know what they wanted there. Desperate, the mercenary says he didn't know a vampire lord ruled the village. He explains they came looking for the illegitimate son of the Taiwan family who was hiding there. But our hero doesn't buy it and asks what their real purpose is. And with a smirk, he asks if they weren't planning on wiping out the entire village. The man then confesses they were hired by Lord Taiwan's legitimate sons, and that they came in large numbers, just in case something went wrong. Our protagonist then realizes the blonde knight was among those who instigated everything, and that knight was Bertal Taiwan, the general manager of the vampire pursuit team. He understands that Bertel knew the mercenaries' greed would lead to a massacre, and it was that massacre that ended up getting him discovered by the Holy Knights. Meanwhile, the mercenary keeps begging, saying he never would have done it if he'd known. Our hero then tells him to get lost, and warns him to watch out for wolves on the way. The man is shocked and starts thanking him for sparing his life, but our boy doesn't forgive him and takes him out with a fatal blow to the neck. Miriam then asks why he eliminated him after getting all the information. He replies that he can't let him live, since his identity as a vampire was discovered. And right on cue, the pack of wolves appears, drawn by the scent of everything. Meanwhile, the chief confirms that the mercenaries came to take Peled to the castle. They remember that Peled's mother passed away, and he's been living alone ever since. So our hero offers to take the boy to the castle safely. He says that since he lives in the forest, he can escort him and avoid the beasts along the way. The village chief is surprised and says he couldn't possibly ask such a thing of him. But our boy says a knight can't ignore this, and Miriam calls him shameless. The little fairy is left completely speechless by our protagonist's audacity. The villagers are also in shock, and the chief stutters the word knight. Miriam keeps freaking out and can't believe what she just heard him say. With a smile, he says his introductions are a bit overdue. Then he introduces himself as Yan Eugene, and to Miriam's surprise, the villagers believe him. He explains to Miriam that the people in the village have never seen a real noble. That's why they wouldn't know the difference, even if he pretended to be one. The villagers then start asking him a bunch of questions about his past in the forest. Our hero just replies that he had his reasons for cutting off contact with people. The chief then says the village is poor and can't afford his services. But our protagonist says it's no problem and asks to stay in the village for one night. The next day, he stands by the window and tests his new ability against the sunlight. With his red eyes, he watches his hands transform into black scales. He notices the scales block the light pretty well, which will make his journey easier. Miriam then calls him stupid and asks why he lied like that. Our hero says it doesn't matter since he's leaving soon, and no one will find out. But the fairy is persistent and asks what his real goal is in all this. Before he can answer, one of the villagers informs him they're ready to leave. He then explains that titles are more reliable than long explanations, and that a title cuts the lies he needs to tell from 100 down to just 10. Our hero knows that real nobles wouldn't fall for such a rushed lie. That's why from now on, he's going to do everything he can to make that lie a reality. The chief then hands him a letter of introduction and asks him to take care of Peled. The young Peled then introduces himself and says it's a pleasure to meet him. And so, our hero and Peled leave the village and set off on their journey to the castle. During their journey, our protagonist and Peled follow a long road through the mountains. When they spot a village, Peled asks if it's Bramus, and our hero confirms that it is. Our boy then asks if he knows how to read, and Peled says his late mother taught him. He explains that the man his mother loved taught her how to read and write. Miriam then suggests that our hero ask Peled to teach him how to read too. Peled is surprised when he asks if he can teach him to read. The young man wonders why a Nike, like him, doesn't know how to read. Our protagonist then makes up a story about his family having fallen on hard times long ago. He keeps up the act and walks with a dejected look in front of the boy, because he knows that once he has Peled's trust, it will cover up all his lies. Miriam is impressed with the act and compliments him on his performance, but she warns him that if he lies too much, people will start to get suspicious. Peled's eyes then start to sparkle, and our hero realizes he's already bought the whole story. The young man apologizes and says he didn't trust him at first because of the rumors. He admits that everyone in the village called him a monster, and it influenced him. But from now on, Peled says he'll believe what he sees with his own eyes. The boy even offers to teach our hero how to read, little by little, whenever they have time. Suddenly, our protagonist uses his magic to create an ice dagger, and with a swift move, he stabs Peled right in the eye without any mercy. The young man screams in pain as our hero blocks the surprise attack that came from the middle of the road. But actually, he just imagined all that to test young Peled's reaction. Turns out, they were really attacked by a group of bandits on the road. Peled is terrified and can't believe they're being mugged. The bandit leader then grins and says their scared faces save him some time. He then orders them to hand over everything of value, or they'll regret it. But before he can finish his sentence, our hero attacks him with his sword. With a single strike, our protagonist takes out the bandit leader. Peled is shocked and frozen in place, not understanding what's happening. One of the bandits screams in despair, seeing his brother taken out right in front of him. Our hero then says they did what he asked, quickly and efficiently. The bandit then gets enraged and charges at our boy with an axe, but he's no match, and our protagonist cuts him down with his sword without mercy. In the blink of an eye, he spins and takes out another one of the bandits. The last bandit then begs for his life and pleads not to be eliminated, but our hero doesn't forgive him and prepares for the final blow. With a swift move, he finishes off the last bandit without hesitation. He then looks at the scattered bodies and says he doesn't understand humans. He wonders why they always try to rob and harm the weaker ones. And with the last bandit in his hands, he asks if it's okay to hurt the weak. Finally, he turns to Peled and asks if he'll understand these things once he learns to read. Peled is speechless and completely shocked by our protagonist's question. Our hero then reminds him that he said he would believe what he saw with his own eyes. And with a serious look, he says he won't let a single drop of blood touch Peled. After a while, they finally arrive in the city of Bramis and explore the place. There, they see a vendor advertising rare herbs from the northern dungeon for 20 coins. At another stall, a customer complains about the price, saying he found it cheaper somewhere else. Miriam is mesmerized by the city and all the cool things she finds there. Peled then warns our hero to be careful, as the merchants there are ruthless. He says the village chief always gets flustered when he comes to the city, but our protagonist says he needs money before he can worry about that. So he asks Peled to wait and goes into a leather and fur shop. He then offers the pelts of the wolves he hunted and asks the shopkeeper for an appraisal. The man is surprised to see it's dire wolf leather and that he brought such a large quantity. He then sizes up our hero from head to toe with a suspicious look, and judging by his worn-out clothes, the shopkeeper figures he's a drifter. With a wicked grin, he realizes our protagonist is the perfect mark to be swindled. The man then offers 18 silver coins, claiming the leather is badly damaged. Our hero then glares at him, his red eyes glowing intensely, and with a swift move, he grabs the shopkeeper by the collar and startles him. Ichi is terrified and wonders why that guy's eyes are so red. Scared, the shopkeeper stammers that dire wolf leather is rare and in limited supply. He asks our hero to calm down and settle things with words. He then lets out a nervous laugh and says he'll be generous and raise the offer to 23 coins. Our protagonist just stares at him with a cold, piercing gaze without saying a word. The man starts to sweat and raises the offer to 25 5 coins. Pellet gets desperate and yells out 8 coins to try and help with the negotiation. But our hero remains silent, and the shopkeeper wonders how much more he wants. Finally, the man offers 30 silver coins, and our protagonist accepts the offer. Later that night, they set up camp, and our hero tries to read an ancient scroll. He says Pellet taught him the basics, but he's still far from reading properly. The writing looks like a bunch of squiggly lines to him, and he feels frustrated. Miriam then compliments his new clothes, saying they look decent for the money spent. She's surprised the market was so generous with them on their first visit. The fairy then complains that he should have pushed for more and bought silk clothes. But our hero says he just needs something to block the sunlight. Miriam then says that vampires are the nobles of nobles and need to have ambition. Our protagonist asks how she knows so much, and she says she learned in the spirit realm. She advises him to study ancient literature, but our hero says he can't read. Suddenly, Pellet appears and calls out to him, snapping our hero out of his thoughts. The young man then asks with a strange smile who he was talking to. Our hero plays it off, saying he was just talking to himself, and asks if Pellet is okay. He says that ordinary people aren't used to seeing bodies like that. Pellet then tells him not to worry, as he still has plenty of energy. And with a smile, he says they have lots of paper, and he can teach him to read as much as he wants. So, the two spend the night around the campfire while Pellet teaches our hero. Our protagonist is surprised at how easily he's learning and asks if that's normal. Pellet then says he's extraordinary, as it usually takes a year to learn. After the lesson, our hero asks if Pellet will be okay becoming a noble's son. The young man says his mother never really explained it, and it hasn't quite sunk in yet. He also admits he wasn't expecting Lord Taiwan to welcome him with open arms. Suddenly, a group of knights approaches their camp in the forest. The group's leader greets them and asks if he can ask a question. Our hero stands up and is on alert as the armed men get closer. The man then notes that they are real mercenaries, not like the ones from before. He knows that if he lies, it will raise suspicion, so he decides to tell the truth. The group's leader then says they are also heading to the castle and asks to camp with them. One of the younger knights complains about the decision, but the leader scolds him. He then apologizes and says the young man is new to the group and doesn't know how to socialize. The leader then introduces himself as Partek and asks who our protagonist is. The knight laughs, not believing that our hero is a real knight. He then asks if our hero is actually a real knight. The young man laughs and says he's never heard of House Eugene in his entire life, and with a wicked smile, he accuses our protagonist of being an imposter. Our hero then realizes he can't lie anymore, since he already told Pellet he was a knight. He understands that if this keeps up, things are going to get very complicated, and with a cold look, he thinks he could just take them all out, since there aren't that many of them. Suddenly, Partek grabs the young knight's shoulder and calls him Robin. Then, he lands a powerful punch right in his face in front of everyone. The blow is so strong that Robin goes flying and hits the ground hard. Partek then bows and apologizes for his recruit's rudeness. Our hero tells him to forget the apology and just find a spot. He knows that from now on, he'll be frequently suspected because of his identity, and to avoid unnecessary suspicion, he needs to become a knight as soon as possible. Rabin wakes up startled, not quite understanding what happened. He gets up confused and wonders why he attacked our protagonist. Partek then calls him a fool and says he has no will to live. He scolds him and says he should be thanking him for saving his life. Partek then explains that he can't judge by appearances and doesn't see what's right in front of him, and with a serious look, he asks if Rabin has any idea how much the cloak our hero is wearing costs. Turns out, it's a high-class cloak reinforced with super, rare lycanthrope leather. He says the cheapest one costs over 10 silver coins, which is 3 times Raban's salary, and the fact that our hero knows how to read means he's no ordinary guy. Partek explains that he was about to draw his sword, and they all would have been done for. Rabin is shocked and asks how he knows all that in such detail. The leader then reveals that he watched our protagonist getting ready to attack. He saw our hero putting his hand inside his cloak, preparing to draw his sword. If he had been 1 second later, Rabin's head would have been chopped off. Partek then says he has no idea how terrifying a knight can be. He explains that a knight trains with a wooden sword from birth. They enter unknown dungeons and slay monsters without fear, and only those who spill a lot of blood and catch the eye of the nobles are finally knighted in a grand and special ceremony. Partek says that impersonating a knight is a serious crime and a huge problem, because someone who reveals themselves as a knight at 20 must have considerable skills. Rabin then asks if that means he's stronger than the squad leader. He also heard that the newly discovered dungeon might be open soon. Our hero overhears the whole conversation and realizes the title of Knight carries a lot of weight. He also finds it strange that the Taiwan family hired mercenaries instead of using their own soldiers. Suddenly, Peled notices that our protagonist is walking toward the mercenaries, and with a smile, he approaches Partek and says he heard they're going to the castle. He then proposes that they travel together, since they're heading to the same destination. Rabin is captivated by our hero's beauty, and Partek is completely confused. After a few days, they finally arrive at the village of Martella in the Taiwan state. Our protagonist is relieved that the mercenaries bought his story, but he knows the real trouble is about to start now. Miriam then appears and says she spied on the mercenaries as he asked. She found out that Lord Taiwan's health is so bad he could pass away at any moment, and that a new dungeon has been discovered, but the family doesn't have the money to explore it. Our hero becomes thoughtful at the idea of a new dungeon opening in the region. Miriam then asks what will happen to Peled if Lord Taiwan passes away. She's worried he'll be an orphan again, but our hero says that's not his problem. The fairy starts to cry, fearing Peled will be taken out by his brothers for nothing. Our protagonist then realizes Lord Taiwan summoned Peled to see him one last time, and with that, he understands that both his and Peled's fates are about to change somehow. After some more travel, they finally reach their destination, and before them stands the imposing Castle of Roses, the home of Lord Taiwan. As they enter the castle, they are impressed by the grandeur of the place. Miriam gets excited and says our hero needs to climb the ranks and live in a castle like this. But he tells her to shut up and get inside, because they have more important things to do. Suddenly, a guard stops them and asks what their business is at the castle. Partek then introduces himself as a mercenary from the Phelan Guild and asks who he is. Suddenly, a blonde man introduces himself as Kamara, the heir of Tawan. He asks if the merchandise is in the cart, and Partek confirms that it is. Kamara then notices our hero standing there and asks why he isn't moving. Our protagonist introduces himself as the knight Yan Eugene, leaving Kamara surprised. But before he can introduce Peled, his brother Bertel suddenly appears. Our hero recognizes the familiar voice and remembers his painful past. Bertel then approaches and says it's his duty as the protector of the castle. He walks up with an air of superiority and a rose emblem on his chest. Our protagonist can't forget the voice of the one who tormented him so much. He remembers when he was discovered while hiding in the forest, and how he was relentlessly pursued by Bertel and Jung Darit without rest. He then glares at the knight Bertel Taiwan with a look of hatred and vengeance. Bertel is the second son of the Taiwan family and a knight of direct lineage. Kamara then asks what his brother is doing there, and he replies with sarcasm. Bertel says he knows very well what he meant by that question. Our hero then interrupts their argument and butts into the brothers' conversation. He hands over the letter from the village chief and says he came on his orders. Bertel is surprised to hear the village's name and takes the letter with curiosity, and with a suspicious look, he sizes up our protagonist from head to toe. Kamara then snatches the letter from his brother's hands to take a look. He recognizes the village chief's name, but Bertel remains suspicious. Upon reading the letter, Kamara is shocked by the news of the mercenaries' demise. He then realizes the boy next to our hero is his father's illegitimate son. Peled shyly introduces himself, and Kamara greets him with a mocking smile. Bertel then says they were expecting Peled, and that his father wants to see him. With a fake smile, he orders them to take the boy to be washed and dressed. Peled is led away by the guards, while Bertel watches him with contempt. Our hero then interrupts and says he wants to discuss the reward first. He demands a meeting with Lord Taiwan, but Bertel denies the request on the spot. With a hateful glare, he says it's impossible and that our hero cannot see him. He explains that his father's condition is critical and offers to pay him in gold to leave. But our protagonist doesn't back down, saying he went through a lot of trouble to bring Peled. Bertel then threatens him and tells him not to make him repeat himself. Kamara then intervenes and asks what the problem is with a quick meeting, but Bertel insists that his father can barely stay awake and can't receive a stranger. The two brothers then start arguing and trading barbs in front of everyone. Bertel looks at his brother angrily and tells him not to twist his words. Kamara then apologizes to our hero for the scene and for his brother's attitude. With a fake smile, he says his goodbyes and tells our protagonist to get home safely. Kamara then approaches Peled and offers to guide him through the castle as his new brother. Seeing this, our hero realizes Bertel really isn't going to let him meet the Lord. Suddenly, a deep voice interrupts the conversation, calling for the second son of Taiwan, and a strong, red-haired man appears, carrying two guys on his shoulders. He then throws the men to the ground and says he caught them looting the local villagers. With a wicked grin, he suggests that one of them be punished as an example to the others. Bertel gets annoyed, as they were just temporary mercenaries for the dungeon. The man then suggests they talk inside, to avoid the prying eyes of everyone. Partek then recognizes the man and wonders if he isn't the famous Sir Galfredic. Our protagonist gets curious and asks Partek if he knows him. The mercenary explains that he placed third in a major tournament hosted by the Evergrow family. On top of that, he's a very promising knight with excellent strength and technique. And on the day of the tournament, he single-handedly defeated over 1,000 competitors with his power. Partek then wonders why such a powerful guy would come to a place like this. He suspects the reason is the new dungeon that was discovered in the region. Since conquering a dungeon first brings a lot of fame and is a dangerous task, and Galfredic probably wants to use this to be knighted by a bigger family. Our hero then turns to Partek and asks if his contract ends today. With a smile, he offers a new job to the mercenary leader, and Bertel understands that his brother Kamara wants to clear the dungeon to win the people's support. In his office, Kamara thinks about what to do, since he can't just hire anyone. Suddenly, one of his servants informs him that Sir Eugene is asking to see him. He then remembers he's the knight who brought Peled and tells the young man to come in. Our hero enters the office, and Kamara greets him formally. The man says he can rest easy, as Peled is safe and will be rewarded. Furthermore, he thanks our boy for handing over the letter in front of his brother. Kamara is happy because, thanks to that, he can hold his head high. Our protagonist says he just had business with the Lord and wasn't expecting a third party. The hero is then surprised and starts to understand our hero's move. He asks if our boy wants to see his father, but he says he has a proposal instead. Eugene then asks to be included in the dungeon subjugation squad. Our protagonist holds back a laugh as Kamara stares at him with a serious look. Suddenly, the hero starts laughing out loud at our hero's unexpected proposal. He finds it all very funny and asks with a smile if he's really a knight. With a mocking look, he repeats the question, doubting his abilities. The man says he heard about the 5 bandits and asks if he just wants a reputation. But our hero replies that for him, the proposal has no downside. He then explains that he wants 100 silver coins and half of the dungeon's loot. Kamara is confused because the offer is far below the current market price. And with a smile, our boy says that he's not the one in a hurry, Kamara is. Kamara then asks what he wants, and our hero repeats his earlier offer. The hare finds the proposal too cheap, which makes him very suspicious. He then thinks that knights live for honor, and that our boy has no backing, and since he doesn't want money, glory must be everything to a knight like him. On top of that, Kamara starts to think about everything he's heard about our protagonist. Our hero then says with a smile that he's not the one in a hurry, Kamara is. The hero is shocked by our protagonist's audacity for saying that, but soon after, he breaks into a smile and realizes the young man is quite clever, because he knows exactly what to say and isn't just any knight. So, Kamara accepts the deal, as there's no reason to refuse such a good offer. The hare then extends his hand to close the deal with our protagonist. He thinks that magic stones are hard to purify, but monster parts sell well. Partic then says he can introduce him to a guild and to just ask for the parts, because that way, Lord Komaru will have no reason to say no to the deal. Bertel then complains to Galfredic that the dungeon is not a playground for children. He explains that inside, one mistake can be fatal, as it's kill or be killed. And for that reason, he won't accept an amateur in the group, especially one found by his brother. Furthermore, he knows that Kamara has no connections with the local nobles. Bertel then tells him to talk to our hero himself if he has a problem. Then, Bertel approaches and says he was just talking with the new knight. Bertel then introduces our hero, Yan Eugene, and his mercenaries to the group. Bertel is shocked to see that the guy from before is the leader of a mercenary group. With a mocking smile, he says they can't accept a stranger with no skills, but Kamara interrupts him and says he can at least vouch for his skills. The hare explains that he heard from his new brother about the bandits on the border, and that he heard our hero took them all out with a single dagger on his way here. Suddenly, Bertel throws a dagger at our protagonist to test him. With a quick move, our hero manages to dodge it and stick the dagger into the wall. The weapon grazes his face and hits the wood right behind him. Galfredic then smiles and approaches our protagonist to provoke him. He then apologizes for his earlier rudeness and approaches with a challenging look. The knight says he looks like a young master with his pale, scar-free skin. With a wicked grin, he then challenges our hero to show him what he can do. So, the two get ready for a duel in the castle courtyard in front of everyone. The news spreads, and everyone gets excited to see Sir Galfredic's duel. The crowd wonders if he's even human, as they say he rips monsters apart with his bare hands. Everyone is eager to see what the third-place winner of the tournament can do. And even without knowing who the opponent is, they already feel sorry for our protagonist. But our hero isn't fazed and prepares for the fight with a confident look. Galfredic then draws his sword with a smile and gets ready for the duel against our hero. With a serious and determined look, Galfredic faces our protagonist, but our hero isn't fazed and stares back at him with a calm expression. He then turns and gets ready for the duel that's about to begin. Suddenly, our boy drops his sword on the ground, shocking Galfredic with his action. A man then raises his hand and announces that the fight is ready to begin. Then, a guard rings a giant bell, and the duel finally starts. Our hero then charges full speed at his opponent. Soon after, the two cross their swords, and sparks fly everywhere. The sound of clashing metal echoes throughout the castle courtyard. The fight continues with both of them moving quickly around the combat arena. Galfredic then smiles and beckons him to fight with a hand gesture. With a series of blows, our protagonist is pushed back by the force of the attack. Rabin gets excited and asks if Eugene is winning, but Partic says no. He explains that Galfredic is just testing the waters and going with the flow. Meanwhile, the knight continues to attack with a smile on his face. He notices that our hero's style is rougher than expected and has no pattern. That's why he finds our boy's fighting style to be wild and completely unpredictable. Our protagonist then realizes what his opponent's true intention is. With a smile, Galfredic accuses him of lying about being a real knight. With a grin, Galfredic says our hero has never been trained and just relies on brute force. Our boy then replies that swordsmanship isn't everything for a real knight. He then attacks with all he's got, saying his opponent talks too much during a fight. But the knight just smiles and challenges him to beat him so he'll shut up. So, the two continue to fight, exchanging a series of powerful blows. Galfredic then uses his strength and manages to push our hero back. Our protagonist is surprised and struggles to stay on his feet against the attack. Even so, he doesn't give up and blocks the blade with a determined look. The impact of the swords is so strong that it creates a huge shock wave in the courtyard. Bertel then wonders if our hero was knocked out by that blow. However, our protagonist is still standing amidst all the dust and destruction. Suddenly, he remembers something and wonders who the heck this guy is. Soon after, a dark and mysterious aura begins to emanate from our boy's body, and with this new power, he charges forward and attacks Galfredic with everything he has. The knight manages to block, but notices that the young man is faster and stronger. He's impressed because our hero learns very quickly in a fight, and now our boy can dodge his blows with much more ease. Galfredic gets even more excited, and the fight between them intensifies. The two continue to trade powerful blows in the middle of the castle arena, and the exchange of blows is so fast that you can barely keep up with their movements. The fight continues with a test of strength, as they measure who is the strongest. With smiles on their faces, the two stare each other down in a power struggle. Without their swords, the fight is now hand to hand, and brute force will decide everything. Galfredic is shocked because our boy is smaller, but has incredible strength. However, our hero admits that his opponent's brute strength is greater than his, but he doesn't give up and prepares to use another tactic in the fight. He knows that in terms of experience, Galfredic has the advantage, so he goes on the attack. Our protagonist is then surprised by his opponent's fighting stance. With a quick move, the knight throws him hard onto the courtyard ground. Galfredic smiles victoriously as our boy falls toward the ground. The impact is so strong that the stone floor cracks from the force of the blow. Then, Galfredic moves in to finish the fight once and for all, but our hero manages to defend himself at the last second and blocks the attack. So, the two continue to fight with an intense exchange of hand-to-hand combat. Galfredic then notices that his movements aren't precise or trained, but he has a survival instinct and learns very quickly in combat. Suddenly, the knight admits that he was defeated in their contest, and with a final blow, our protagonist lands a powerful attack on Galfredic. The knight is sent flying by the force of the decisive attack's impact. He flies and crashes hard into a castle wall, ending the fight. With Galfredic down for the count, the fight finally comes to an end. The announcer then declares that the grand winner of the duel is our protagonist, and so, the knight Yan Eugene is declared the winner of the fight at the castle. The crowd goes wild, and everyone is shocked by our hero's strength. Rabin celebrates and shouts to everyone that this man is their new knight. Defeated on the ground, Galfredic can't believe what just happened. He's still in shock and looks up at the sky, completely speechless. The knight can't understand how he was defeated by such an unknown guy. Suddenly he gets up, and with his eyes glowing red, he charges forward. Our protagonist turns around and braces himself for round 2, but Galfredic just smiles and raises our hero's arm in a gesture of victory. And to everyone's surprise, he calls for a round of applause for the winner. The knight then starts chanting our hero's name, and the crowd follows suit. Bertel is furious at the scene and can't believe what he's seeing. Later, a banquet is served for our protagonist in his chambers. Our hero feels awkward since he doesn't need food to survive. The servant then says he received orders from Kamara to take care of his meals. The maid also asks if the lighting is okay, as she heard about his sensitive skin. Miriam then starts laughing and wonders if he's going to get a stomach ache from all that. But our hero just accepts the kindness and dismisses all the servants from the room. With his red eyes glowing, he says he prefers to be alone. After that day, the way people saw him changed completely. Kamara then shows up and greets him, asking if he slept well last night. The hare notices he rejected all the perks, and our boy is at a loss for words. Suddenly, Ravin appears and greets him with an exaggerated bow. Galfredic also pops up and clings to our hero, calling him friend and comrade. The knight asks if he slept well, because his face still hurts from yesterday's duel. He then shows his bruised face, and our hero wonders if he wants another beating. Galfredic invites him to train, and Kamara gets excited to watch the fight. Our protagonist realizes the knight doesn't care if he's a noble or not. Even so, he's still not used to having so many people around him. Suddenly, Pellet appears and calls out to our hero with a smile. The young man asks if he's been doing well, and everyone stares at him curiously. Meanwhile, in a dark room, someone begs their lord for their life, but their screams are useless, and they are taken out without any mercy. The man then says none of this would have happened if he had just done his job. Bertel then appears and says the red-eyed knight wouldn't have come, and because of that, his whole plan went down the drain, and everything went wrong. The man begs for forgiveness, and Bertel complains about the mercenaries who were defeated, and in a rage, he asks if his eyes are just for decoration and attacks him with everything he's got. Bertel then calls the man useless, and gets ready for the final blow. He plunges the dagger into the man's eye, taking him out without any mercy. The other servants are terrified by the scene and tremble with fear. Bertel then wonders what he should do to solve the problem, because he knows he can't just eliminate someone who's already inside the castle. But soon after, he gets a brilliant idea to get rid of our hero. He decides it's the only way, and that it will be a clean elimination. Meanwhile, Pellet is in his room, lying on the bed, deep in thought. Our hero then says Bertel sent him to the dungeon to meet his end. The young man confirms it, saying he was sent to the dungeon to meet his end too. Our protagonist then reminds him of the mercenaries who were attacked by the wolves, and that they never wanted him to reach the castle alive from the very beginning. But our boy says there's a way for him to survive all of this. He then offers Pellet the chance to become his vassal and join him. Our hero explains that he's already 16 and can choose his own path. He can either stay hidden and wait for his end, or fight with all his might. On the day the dungeon opens, no one knows what kind of monsters will appear. Galfredic explains that the goal is to advance as far as possible and retreat if a strong monster shows up. He then sends the scouts to find the dungeon entrance in the forest, and one of the porters plans to fake an injury so he won't have to fight on the front lines. He then says that if it gets dangerous, they can just run and save themselves. Suddenly, Bertel appears, and the porter is startled by his presence. The knight asks where Pellet is, and the man stammers, not knowing what to say. One of the men points, and Bertel is confused by what he sees. Pellet is handing a snack to our hero, telling him to come back safe. Bertel is furious when he sees this and angrily approaches the two. He then yells for Pellet and finds him standing next to our protagonist. With a hateful glare, he asks if the young man forgot what he told him. The knight orders him to grab his bag and get to his position immediately. Bertel gets even more irritated as Pellet ignores him and stays put. And so, our hero and the knight stare each other down with a defiant look. Bertel then grabs Pellet and yells for him to get back to his post. But our protagonist grabs his hand and tells him to take his hand off the boy. Bertel is shocked and can't believe what he just heard from our hero. Our boy then asks if he's lost his mind, sending a kid into the dungeon. Bertel calls him rude and says he just wants to make his brother stronger. And angrily, he says our hero has no right to control the boy. But our protagonist replies that he's the one who doesn't know his place. And with a serious look, he reveals that Pellet became his vassal yesterday. Bertel is shocked by the news, and our hero says everyone here is a witness. Galfredic then says their bond is stronger than blood and threatens anyone who touches Pellet. Our hero then faces Bertel and invites him to a brawl if he wants to warm up. The knight is furious and yells, asking who gave him permission to do that. He also says that taking in a bastard son from another family will block Eugene's future. Meanwhile, the soldiers comment that the duel between the two leaders was incredible. One of them wonders how long it would take to get that strong, and the other pokes fun at him. Suddenly, Kamara appears and says he would also entrust his younger brother to our hero. He even explains that Pellet is already an adult and can choose his own path in life. Our protagonist then thinks that Pellet is the prey, and that survival isn't easy for the weak. That's why if you can't get strong, the only option is to join a pack. Kamara then invites our hero to his office and asks if he knows how to read. Meanwhile, a scout reports that there are no monsters nearby and the area is clear. Galfredic then says they can open the dungeon now, and our hero agrees with the idea. And so, the massive dungeon door finally begins to open for the group. The knight then looks back and tells everyone to survive on their own. The soldiers get ready with their weapons and armor to enter the dungeon, and with our hero and Galfredic in the lead, the group finally advances into the darkness. Kamara says goodbye and tells them he'll see them in 4 days, while Pellet wishes them good luck. The door then closes, and a voice wishes for the gods to protect them all inside. And inside the dungeon, a dark and scary path awaits them. Suddenly, a horde of goblins ambushes the group in the dungeon. Galfredic and our hero fight with everything they've got to protect their comrades. One of the soldiers is relieved to be alive, but Galfredic yells at him. The knight complains that they can't even hold their formation properly. He then orders everyone to get back to their positions and keep fighting. The archers then fire their arrows to defend the cave's ceiling, but the goblins keep attacking, and the situation becomes more and more dangerous. Despite their defense, the horde of monsters advances relentlessly on the group. The porter then realizes that volunteering for the dungeon was a crazy idea. Scared, he decides he needs to get out of there and run as fast as he can. But as he tries to escape, he finds more goblins in his path in the darkness. And just as he's about to be attacked, a blade saves him at the last second. Our hero then calls him a fool and asks if he really thought there wouldn't be any monsters. Galfredic scolds him and says the safest option now is to stick together. He then yells for everyone to raise their swords and hold their positions. The soldiers fight bravely, but the goblin horde seems endless. Galfredic then realizes the group's condition is pathetic and wonders how they can win. Suddenly, a soldier warns that the monsters are attacking again, and to make matters worse, another soldier yells that more monsters are coming from behind. Our hero then offers to cover the rear and heads into battle. Galfredic then yells for our hero to wait, as it's dangerous to go alone, but Eugene ignores the warning and charges into the dungeon's darkness by himself. The knight is shocked and confused, as it all happens so fast. Our hero moves like a blur and takes out the monsters in the blink of an eye. With incredible speed, he crushes a goblin's head without any trouble. Galfredic then yells for Pertek to follow him and provide cover for our protagonist. The knight is impressed, as he can't understand how he got so far in just a few seconds. Suddenly, Eugene returns and says he took care of everyone and found something interesting. Galfredic is speechless, as our hero doesn't know what a common glow herb is. And even with incredible fighting skills, he's clueless about basic dungeon items. After the battle, the group rests while the wounded receive medical care. A soldier then approaches and reports that the collection of mana stones is complete. However, our hero is disappointed, because they took out a lot of monsters and found very little. He then notices the stones are blue, unlike the one he got from the roamer. Miriam appears and explains that the quality of the stone depends on the monster's power. The fairy says that dungeon monsters can become roamers, but their stones don't grow. She also reminds him that the roamer he faced was special and very powerful. Our protagonist then realizes he was lucky to have consumed the creature's red stone. Miriam then suggests that there might be high-rank monsters in this dungeon. Suddenly, the break is over, and Galfredic yells for everyone to get back in formation. Galfredic then yells at his men, calling them weak for being scared. He says that he and our hero will lead the way, and that no one should run from the battle. Our boy then thinks that this is also his first time in a dungeon. Suddenly, Galfredic appears and says the mercenaries are useless, and that he needs to step up. The knight also warns that the next enemies will be on a whole different level, and in the darkness, they find a group of orcs with goblins as their soldiers. The soldiers are terrified and huddle together, afraid of what's to come. Our protagonist then realizes that a high-rank monster awaits them in the depths. He then remembers the day he ate the red stone from the master of the swamp, and after that, he gained a new and very powerful ability. So he wonders if he'll gain another ability if he consumes another stone like that one. With his heightened senses, he detects more than 50 footsteps 100 meters away. Galfredic is impressed by our hero's sharp hearing and senses. He then hands a spear to our boy and asks if he wants to throw it. With incredible strength, our protagonist launches the weapon. Like a red bolt of lightning, the spear hits one of the orcs dead on and explodes in a devastating impact. With the first strike made, Galfredic orders all troops to charge with everything they've got. And while our hero is already in the thick of the battle, the rest of the group follows close behind. One of the men asks if they should join in, and our boy smashes one of the monsters. He punches an orc in the eye with brutal force and no mercy at all. Then, he uses his sword and plunges it into the monster's head without hesitation. Our hero then blocks an attack and prepares to attack the enemy, and with a single blow, he cuts the orc in half in a shower of blood. Covered in filth, our protagonist licks his lips with a wild and terrifying look. That day, the mercenaries fought while witnessing a scene of pure carnage. Suddenly, our hero uses his ability and transforms his arm into black scales, and with his transformed hand, he grabs one of the orcs' heads with force. His swordsmanship is elegant, and his nobility is uncorrupted throughout the fight. And even with a dignified posture, a dark and sinister aura emanates from his body. The mercenaries are shocked because he's different from the knights they know. But Galfredic's look shows that it's far from admiration, it's fear, because our hero gives himself over to a bloody and savage fury in battle. After the fight, the group rests around a campfire, surrounded by monster bodies. One of the men tends to the wounded while everyone seems exhausted and scared. All over the dungeon floor, the bodies of goblins and mercenaries are scattered everywhere. Galfredic then realizes that most of his troops have lost the strength to continue, and he understands it's not physical exhaustion, but mental fatigue from the scene. Therefore, the knight decides it's impossible for the group to keep advancing, so he approaches our hero and suggests they turn back, since they've already accomplished their goal. Our hero then says his stamina is still fine, and it's a shame to turn back now. Galfredic is left with no choice and yells that if he's going forward, they're all going together. Our protagonist then smashes another orc to clear a path in the dungeon. He also tells Galfredic to lead the subjugation group out of the cave, because from here on, he'll continue with only his trusted mercenaries. The other soldiers are relieved, and Galfredic wonders if he was showing consideration. The knight then understands that Eugene makes him reconsider what it means to be a knight. And so, our hero and his two men advance alone through the dungeon's darkness. Rabin then complains that he didn't want to go, and that he's terrified of meeting his end there. But he calms down, knowing that our hero can defeat even a troll by himself. Suddenly, the young man trips and falls to the ground after stepping on something strange and slimy. He then looks to the side and realizes he just stepped on a giant spider, and to everyone's despair, they are surrounded by a swarm of enormous spiders. These creatures are giant cave spiders that live in groups and use venom. Rabban panics and screams in desperation as the monsters advance to attack him. Partek then says there are too many enemies, and they should retreat for now. But our hero wonders why they should retreat from this battle, and with a quick slash, he cuts one of the spiders in half without any trouble. Our protagonist then says it's not a problem and continues to fight with everything he's got. Partek then yells for Rabban to join him, as our hero is already in the thick of it. With a determined look, our hero continues to fight alongside his men. Suddenly, Rabban is surrounded by spiders and screams desperately for help. He's then attacked by one of the creatures, but manages to defend himself with his sword. Our hero then rushes in and saves Robin at the last second with a well-aimed strike. The young man is speechless and completely shocked by our protagonist's speed. Suddenly, our boy grabs Rabban and throws him away with incredible force. The young man flies through the air and lands on the ground, not understanding what's happening. And while he's still on the ground, our hero charges forward and finishes off all the spiders. With a smile, Rabban says our hero is amazing and suggests they head back. He then turns to Partek and asks if he agrees with the idea, but his commander is paralyzed with fear, trembling from head to toe. With wide eyes, he stares into the darkness and wonders what is there. It turns out that among the roamer species, there are different power ranks, and before them appears the Spider Queen, a Lord rank monster, and a very powerful one at that. Partek is terrified of the creature and says they can't fight a lord, and that at the very least, Galfredic should be with them to help in the battle. Suddenly, our hero calls out to Partek and Rabban with a serious and cold look, and with his red eyes glowing, he tells them to fall back because this prey is his. Partek gets the message, but feels his body being controlled by a strange force. He then realizes that every nerve in his body is screaming at him to run from this place. Miriam appears and says their instincts have succumbed to the power difference with the master. Our hero then asks if the Spider Lord is on the same level as the Swamp Lord, but she says no. She also says it seems to be stronger, so its mana stone will be bigger. With that thought, our boy faces the creature, which lets out a terrifying roar. But he isn't fazed and says the harder the chest, the more exciting the treasure. After the battle, our hero tests his new ability on a small yellow spider. He then uses his power and cuts the creature in half with a super sharp mana thread. Now in new clothes, he shows that he can control threads to manipulate things. It turns out that by consuming the Lord's Stone, he gained a second special ability, and this new ability is called Camouflage, which helps him hide better. So, by combining it with his skin reinforcement, he can finally walk in the sunlight. With this, our protagonist no longer has to worry about avoiding daylight. Back at the castle, a banquet is held, and everyone compliments our hero's good looks. The women are charmed, as they heard he defeated a giant spider all by himself. Marianne is happy with the attention, and the girls ask him to tell his story. Two young women then comment on his appearance, and ask if he has elven ancestors. Our boy feels uncomfortable, thinking the situation has gotten even more complicated. However, he doesn't deny it, and one of the men shouts that now it all makes sense. Galfredic then understands why he had such sharp eyes and ears in the dungeon, and also how he had such agile movements and superhuman strength to fight. With a cold look, our protagonist thinks that he knew he wasn't an ordinary human. Galfredic gets excited and says, "Who would have thought our hero had elven blood?" He then asks how he managed to hide for so long with that appearance. Our protagonist thinks his companion is strangely perceptive and observant, but with a smile, he just says he never tried to hide his true appearance. Galfredic and the woman are left speechless by his cold and direct answer. The knight then comments that he says that without even changing his facial expression. Our boy then realizes that people see what they want to see, not the truth. Besides the ability, he also gained something extra by consuming the magic stone, because when one of his tattoos disappeared, strange memories surfaced in his mind. In these memories, he saw himself in an unknown place with gentle hands holding him, and in a strange space with bells ringing, everyone was looking at him. He then wonders who the woman in the memory was, and if it was even real. Since he doesn't remember his past, the only thing he knows is his own name. Suddenly, he snapped out of his thoughts and returns to the party at the castle. Raban then appears with a tearful face and begs our hero to save him. Galfredic holds him back and yells that he heard everything and that he was dead weight in the dungeon. The young man then shouts that our hero isn't human and that anyone would have run from there. The knight scolds him and says he's going to put him through special training. And amidst all the chaos, the only thing our protagonist remembers is the name Eugene. But after that incident, he starts to have a premonition about his future. He then feels that if he keeps removing the tattoos, he might uncover the truth, and with that, he'll finally find out who he really is and where he came from. In the Lord's chamber, everyone gathers to hear about the success in the dungeon. Crema, Galfredic's third son, introduces himself, and our hero does the same. Lord T1 then says he must have had a tough time, and our hero introduces himself. He then asks our protagonist to hand over what he brought with him. And to everyone's surprise, the Lord hands him a document to verify his status. With the document in hand, our protagonist says thank you, and Marianne celebrates the achievement. Suddenly, the Lord starts coughing, and his son Kamara rushes to help him. The man then says he can't close his eyes in peace with his second son's ambitions, but Kamara reassures him, saying he will lead the territory he built with pride. The Lord then says a territory is nothing, and that he must take care of the people. And with young Pelid standing by his side, he says a lord must lead the people, not the land. In his final moments, he holds Pelid's hand and passes away peacefully. Our hero notices that some people are mourning, but not everyone shares the sentiment. Suddenly, Kamara glares at our protagonist with a look of hatred and anger. And at the Lord's funeral, not everyone seems sad about what happened there. Outside, Galfredic apologizes for leaving during the funeral, but Kamar understands. The knight then turns to our hero and asks if he's really going to stay there. Our hero then says he wants to go to the dungeon one more time, because it's a waste. Galfredic thinks it's a shame, and says that Count Evergrow would have liked him very much. The knight then approaches and extends his hand for a farewell shake. With a smile, he says it was an honor to compete with such a strong knight. And with a serious look, He hopes they don't meet his enemies next time. Our hero then shakes the knight's hand, and the two part ways with respect. The two look at each other with a smile and finish the handshake firmly. And so, Galfredic leaves and Rabin waves goodbye as our hero watches. Pellet is then confused because our hero said he was staying and asks what he's going to do. Partek then explains that knights ride horses and that they're going to the trading company. And with a smile, he says they're going to buy a horse and sell the items from the dungeon. Pellet gets excited and says he'll help as our hero's attendant, but our protagonist surprises him by saying he won't need his help for a while. The young man is confused and doesn't understand what he meant by that. Suddenly, the scene changes and Pellet is working hard at a busy port. He carries heavy boxes while a man yells at him to work properly. It turns out they are in Marin, the largest trading city in the kingdom of Kaler. Rabin boasts to the other workers, saying the dungeon's spoils belonged to a knight. The men are shocked to learn it was the knight who defeated a live troll. Suddenly, Rabin yells at a merchant, telling him not to touch the items carelessly. Pellet works hard under the sun and feels exhausted from the heavy labor. He then thinks that our hero's negotiations are taking too long. Meanwhile, in a building, our protagonist is meeting with a man. The man introduces himself as Billmore and says he will handle all the spoils. Our hero is surprised, as he didn't expect Partek to introduce him to a major company. He then realizes this will be very useful for him, as he doesn't understand networking. Suddenly, a man enters the room and interrupts their conversation. With a slap, he shoves Billmore aside and asks who Sir Eugene is. Our protagonist and Partek are on high alert with the stranger's arrival. The mercenary then whispers that the situation could get tricky, and our hero asks why. He explains that the man is a secretary to the vice manager of the trading company, and that they probably came to steal the spoils for a lower price. With a serious look, our protagonist thinks he needs to be cautious now. Billmore then tells the man named Grail that he's closing a deal with our hero. Grail says that rumors about the knight who defeated a troll have spread throughout the port, but he thinks it's just a rookie's strategy to inflate the product's value. He then offers a special contract, planning to trick our hero and rob him. Suddenly, Grail feels a strange pressure and gets scared by our boy's presence. Our protagonist glares at him with a cold look, and the man wonders what that pressure is. Scared, he introduces himself as the vice manager's secretary and says it's a great opportunity. With a cold stare, our hero questions what he means by opportunity. The man then explains that it's a chance to sell his items on better terms. Our protagonist repeats his words with an even more suspicious look. Terrified, the secretary says the guild's vice manager herself will handle the deal. He then apologizes for any disrespect, and our hero stares at him coldly. Grail then panics and runs out of the room, screaming for his life. Seeing this, Billmore gets super emotional that he turned down the offer for his sake. Because of this, the merchant promises to give his full support to our protagonist from now on. With a smile, our hero says he likes the idea and accepts Billmore's proposal. The man then stands up excitedly and asks when they can start working together. Our boy gets up and tells them to start right now, outside the shop. Meanwhile, Grail apologizes to the vice manager for failing his earlier mission. The woman tells him not to worry, as knights always cause trouble out of pride. And with a wicked smile, she says they should get even by using their power as merchants, since the opponent is just a poor knight who doesn't even have a decent horse. So, she tells Grail to give our hero a gift he can't refuse. Later, Pellet is shocked to learn he'll be staying behind to sell the spoils. Our protagonist confirms it and says he must sell everything he brings to Billmore. The young man is sad and asks why he has to stay behind again this time. He even asks if his skills aren't good enough and offers to start training. Our hero then asks what the true role of a squire is, leaving him speechless. The young man then replies that a squire's role is to assist his knight in life and in battle. So, our protagonist explains that his duty is to take care of his daily life, and that his mission as his squire is to sell the items and make money. He also tells him to discuss the details with Billmore and learn about business. Pellet then understands that if it weren't for our hero, he would have been done for long ago. and as a reward, our hero promises to teach him how to fight when they have more money. Our boy also says that one day, Peled will help him in his battles too. The young man is moved by the promise, his eyes filling with tears, and with a smile, he accepts the order and swears to obey his command. With everything settled, they finally head out into the streets of Marin City. After some shopping, a vendor says goodbye, and they continue on their way. But our hero wonders if money always runs out this quickly. Miriam also laments, and Partek asks if they can recover it all quickly. Suddenly, Partek calls out to our hero, who seems to have seen something interesting, and before them, an imposing suit of plate armor shines in the shop window. Partek says the armor is every knight's dream, but our hero just thinks it's expensive. The mercenary then explains that it's an item so expensive it's passed down for generations. Suddenly, Raven comes running and shouting desperately for our hero. With a panicked look, he warns that a horde of roamers has appeared on the outskirts, and that the monsters are trying to invade the city, and the guilds can barely hold them back. Partek then tells our hero it's best to join the monster subjugation, but our boy wonders why he should get involved in that. Raven then explains that unclaimed quests have no commission fee, and that in Marin they can sell everything for free and make a lot of money. With his eyes sparkling, Raven shouts that this is the plan because they're going to get rich. Our protagonist agrees and tells them to go, as there's no reason to hesitate. Suddenly, a voice yells for them to wait, and our hero wonders who it is. It's then that Grail appears, running and out of breath, with a horse in hand. The man introduces himself and says the vice manager sent a warhorse as a gift. He describes the animal as a magnificent creature with a black coat and the muscles of a god. Our hero then gets suspicious and asks if the gift is really for him. Grail is startled by his gaze and stammers that they don't want anything in return. Our protagonist continues to stare at the man with his cold, red eyes. Scared, the secretary says it's just a small token of goodwill. Without wasting any time, our hero takes the reins and tells Grail to thank the vice manager. Miriam then gets excited and tells him to hurry up and make some good money from the hunt. Ravan is shocked by the horse's speed and asks what they should do. Partek then yells for his men to run and follow our hero into battle. The scene then shifts to the outskirts of the city, where some goblins are in the forest. Suddenly, one of the monsters looks to the side, seeming to have sensed something strange. On his horse, our hero charges through the forest at high speed. He arrives at the battle, taking out one of the monsters on his way in. Miriam appears worried and asks if the scale of the attack is too large. She fears the guild members who were at the front have already been defeated. But our protagonist just replies that's a good thing, with a very cold look, because he makes it clear that he doesn't like sharing the spoils of battle one bit. And with that, the horse continues to run, destroying everything in its path. The bright sun shines through the trees as he gets closer to his destination. He finally arrives at the battlefield and sees the army fighting against the monsters. There, a knight named Madrika is facing a horde of orcs all by herself. She yells that they are wretches and that they'll never get past her. However, the monsters charge with everything they've got and surround her, ready for the final attack. The knight tries to escape, but her horse is knocked down in the chaos. And even on the ground, she introduces herself as the Knight of Justice of Marin. Madrika then gets scared and realizes she's completely cornered by the enemies. The monsters stare at her with a look of pure malice and get ready to attack. And in desperation, the knight screams for her life, begging to be spared. One of the orcs attacks, but its blow is blocked at the last second by a sword, because our hero arrives with a bang, mounted on his imposing black horse. And without wasting any time, he starts cutting down all the monsters around him. Madrika is shocked by our hero's speed as he eliminates the monsters, and in the blink of an eye, he takes out all the orcs around her. The knight then thanks him and asks for her savior's name, but suddenly, an orc attacks from behind, and our protagonist faces it coldly. Madrika then takes out the monster and turns to our hero with a smile. Our boy then asks what his name is in such a dangerous moment. He also says that if they both kick the bucket there, his name won't matter anyway. The knight agrees with him, saying that's fair and that she understands, and with a smile, She says she'll ask again when they get out of there alive. Back in the city, she tells everyone that hundreds of goblins attacked them on the road. She boasts that at the final moment, the knight took them all out without hesitation, and in the end, they emerged victorious and bravely protected the city of Marin. A man then asks who the knight she keeps talking about is. With a serious look, she reveals that the hero's name is Yan Eugene. Everyone is shocked and recognizes the name of the knight who cleared the dungeon. The crowd then goes wild and starts chanting his name through the city streets. From a window, a man watches everything and says the whole city is shouting for him. He is Louis Farron, the city's mayor, and he fears Eugene will become difficult to control. The mayor then asks his granddaughter, Priscilla, if they can just let things be, but she says that the higher a knight's honor, the harder the fall. Priscilla then asks if her grandfather has heard about Yan Eugene's attendant. With a smile, she reveals that the boy is actually the illegitimate son of House Taiwan. Mayor Louis Farron is surprised and starts to understand the whole situation. She explains that Eugene wants to make money to support the hidden heir, and if they succeed, the two could form ties with the future head of House Taiwan. The mayor praises his granddaughter and says he now understands her intentions well. For that reason, he decides to send a gift to our hero as a token of gratitude. He also says he'll make her the recommender, and she thanks her grandfather. Later that night, the moon illuminates the Merchant Guild's building. Priscilla then picks up a cup and thinks that a thirsty man seeks water. She says that a merchant only knows one path to follow for success, and with a wicked smile, she reveals that the plan is to dig a well and wait. Our hero then walks, unsuspecting, toward his destination. The door opens, and she waits for him so he'll drink every drop she offers. With a smile, she welcomes our protagonist to the guild, and in a new suit of armor, our hero introduces himself as the savior of Marin. He says he came to say thanks, and she invites him to sit and talk. Priscilla observes him and wonders if he's really the knight from the stories. She thinks that he looks nothing like the knights she imagined, but with a super fake smile, she says the mayor's gift suits him very well. Priscilla explains that the armor is a mix of iron and ogre bone. She asks how he feels, and our hero says it will make the next dungeon easier. Our boy thanks her and says that because of her, his men are healthier. With a wicked smile, Priscilla says she wasn't expecting anything in return, but just as she's about to make a proposal, our hero gets up to leave. He then says he'll visit her again when the dungeon suppression is over. Eugene also reminds her that their contract ends there, and it might be the last time they speak. He also reveals he's going to focus on collecting magic stones, and she becomes furious, desperate. The woman yells for our protagonist to wait and not to leave. Our hero stops for a moment, but doesn't say a single word to her. She then gets up and says, there's still something they haven't discussed. Our boy turns around and asks what that would be with a very mocking look. Priscilla glares at him and says he can't pretend not to have noticed forever. She then lists the most expensive armor, the war horse, and the luxury meals. One of the men even confirms that the spoils didn't even cover half of everything. With a smile, she asks if he hasn't learned that everything in the world has a price, and even threatens him, saying the hero of Marin is a knight without honor. Our protagonist just listens to her with a cold look, his red eyes glowing. She then challenges him, asking if he's just gonna leave after accepting all that. But our hero seems to find the whole situation quite amusing. With a smile on his face, our hero finds the whole situation pretty funny. He says she gave orders and gifts that nobody asked for, and now she wants payment. And with his red eyes, he wonders how a merchant dares to threaten him. His attitude then shocks Priscilla and all her men in the room. Our boy says he already has a contract and doesn't care what people say. He also warns her that everything has a price and tells her to say whatever she wants, because then she'll understand the true meaning of the word price. He then turns the tables and says her company harassed the hero who saved the city, and because of that, no knight will want to help Marin in the future. Partek then apologizes for our hero's audacity and says it's regrettable. Priscilla regrets it, knowing she could have had a better relationship with him. One of her men then calls her, snapping her out of her deep thoughts, and then he asks our protagonist to wait a moment before leaving. Priscilla then bows and apologizes for being rude and disrespectful. She says her desire for advantage went too far and wants to start over. Furthermore, she guarantees that the contract with Billmore will continue as before. The woman thinks that most knights only seek fame, but he is different, and she understands that our hero is too dangerous to be messed with. That's why her merchant instincts won't let her ignore him anymore. So with that, she decides she's going to change her tactic with him. Our hero then says he can at least hear what she has to say, but he warns that it better be a good enough offer to justify it. Priscilla then thanks him for his mercy and for hearing her out. Back in the forest, Miriam complains that the armor is just for show and ugly. Partek then praises our hero for the contract, and Miriam boasts with pride. He explains that the trading company operates on a massive scale throughout the empire. The company has hundreds of branches and deals with demonic kingdoms in the region, and the offer of unlimited access to dungeons is exceptionally bold. Partek praises our hero's move, but he says he only did it because he was annoyed. Suddenly, one of the new mercenaries says that flashy armor doesn't make you a knight, and with a mocking look, he wonders if our hero even knows how to hold a sword. Miriam gets irritated by the comment, and our protagonist ignores the provocation. Suddenly, Kamara appears and says our hero arrived just in time. He then calls him Lord Tawan, and our boy greets him back. Kamara explains that his brother hired new mercenaries for the dungeon. He remembers that the old group was quite unpleasant and was taken out by wolves, and the new mercenaries seem to be very similar to the old ones in every way. That's why for the dungeon subjugation, he wants our hero to be the commander. The group's leader then interrupts him and butts into their conversation, and with a glare, he asks if he will be the commander who meets his end. The mercenaries are shocked, and Rabin yells that this is senseless blasphemy. However, their leader says he doesn't like to talk like that. But they're not on a picnic, because in a dungeon, human life is worthless, and it's natural to prepare for the worst. With a smile, our hero stares at the man, who stammers the word, commander. Eugene then agrees, saying that if he bites the dust, the bald-headed jerk can take command. Miriam then points at the man, and our protagonist says he already knows everything, because he's well aware that this is all a setup by the jealous Bertel. He knows the plan is to use the mercenaries to take him out inside the dungeon, but with a wicked grin, our hero thinks it'll be fun to ruin everything. In the dungeon, Miriam uses her magic while our protagonist gets ready for the fight. And without wasting any time, our hero charges forward and cuts down the goblins with his sword. He moves with agility, taking out several monsters in his path. With a single blow, he cuts down another goblin and continues to advance alone. The blade of his sword goes right through a monster's head. The mercenary leader then realizes his reputation is no exaggeration, because our hero is at the front, cutting down dozens of enemies by himself without stopping. It's as if he's a giant shield that gives a sense of security. The mercenary then decides he needs to watch carefully for an opening to attack, and with his poisoned blade, all he needs is one scratch on his face. Our hero tells them to be careful, as the mid-level monsters are about to appear. He then emphasizes once more to the group that only the confident should follow him. The mercenary leader says that if the commander is going, they will too, because this is their chance. However, when Partek and Rabin get ready to go, the leader tells them to wait for now. Surprised, Partek says that our hero seems to have something else in mind with this plan. Meanwhile, our protagonist advances alone through the cave's darkness. Alone, he remembers that the last time he was there was with the knight Galfredic. An image of his former battle companion appears in his mind, because he thinks that Galfredic was an excellent leader who always fought at the front. With that, he would have cleared the dungeon even with that bunch of weak men. Suddenly, our boy stops walking and gets lost in thought in the middle of the path. He then wonders what the knight would have done in the same situation. Suddenly, the mercenaries finally surround him and reveal their true intentions. Feralus, and with a smile, he says they've finally dropped their disguise. Miriam then appears, and he says that if they want to meet their end, he'll grant their wish. Desperate, the men yell for him to wait and wonder what that is, because the little fairy casts a powerful spell with a very wicked smile. Then, A wave of energy puts out the torches, leaving them in the dark. Terrified, the mercenaries wonder how he can use magic too. In the dark, the leader yells for them to stay calm and relight the torches. However, amidst the chaos and darkness, two glowing eyes appear. In the dark, one of the mercenaries screams in desperation because he can't see anything. Suddenly, he's attacked, and the leader yells for everyone to fight back. One of the men then realizes they are attacking their own comrades. Amidst the screams of pain, our hero uses his new ability with red threads. With his eyes glowing, he controls the men, and the carnage continues. The leader then panics and tries to light a stone to make a fire. He thinks that without light, this is the perfect chance to escape alone. However, the man is left completely speechless when he realizes what's happening, because he can't hear anything and wonders why everything has gone silent. Suddenly, our protagonist appears behind him in the cave's darkness, and with a smile, he asks if the mercenary really needs light. Our hero then helps him and says that human eyes are weak in the dark. The light reveals the bloodbath, and he asks if the man can see better now. He then questions who the hunter is, and who is the prey in this situation. The leader calls him a monster as our hero shows his sharp fangs. Back at the castle, a fierce storm rages through the night. Suddenly, Kamara comes running in, shouting for our protagonist. Our hero calmly waits for him in the castle hallway. With his red eyes, he gives the lord a dead serious look. Kamara then gets closer and asks if the news he heard is true. Bertel shows up too, and our boy tells him to hear it from the horse's mouth. Just like that, he tosses the leader of the mercenaries onto the floor, right in front of them. The brothers are in shock when they see the mercenary, Maverick, all beaten to a pulp. Desperate, the man confesses that he tried to eliminate our protagonist in the dungeon. Bertel, with a smirk, says the guy has finally lost his marbles. He yells at his brother, asking how far he's going to take this crazy act. He even accuses him of believing the words of a man who is clearly out of his mind. Bertel tells the man to stop mumbling and explain things properly. However, Maverick seems to be under some kind of control, referring to Eugene as his master. He then says he deserves what's coming to him and gets ready to jump out the window. Without a second thought, the mercenary throws himself from the top of the castle. Kamara screams his name from the balcony, but it's too late to save him. The man's body falls and ends up skewered on a statue in the courtyard. Bertel claims he went insane after seeing people get taken out in the dungeon, but Kamara glares at him, saying he found it odd how relieved Bertel seemed by the event. Bertel then gets ticked off and says our protagonist is just like him. He even asks if our hero has any pride as a knight. Our boy then asks if he is truly innocent, on his honor. Scared, Bertel stammers but insists he is innocent of all accusations. Our protagonist then challenges him to a trial by combat, and with a smile, he says they'll bet their honor and the truth as knights. Bertel is left furious and speechless by the unexpected proposal. On the day of the duel, the servants are gossiping about what happened in the castle. They comment that Bertel always causes trouble, but this time he went way too far. One of the maids asks who the target was, and the other says it was Sir Yan Eugene. And so, Bertel faces our hero in the castle courtyard for the duel. With a serious look, the knight holds his sword and prepares for the fight. Kamara then appears and announces that they will determine the truth through combat, and that the truth, according to God's will, shall be granted to the victor. With his sword in hand, our protagonist readies himself for the final duel. Suddenly, Bertel charges forward and attacks our hero with a powerful strike. With a yell, he brings his sword down to end the fight once and for all. Our protagonist faces him with a calm expression, showing no fear, and with just one hand, he blocks the attack and shatters Bertel's blade. The knight then uses his own sword and prepares to attack our hero with everything he's got. The two then exchange powerful blows, sparks flying everywhere. Our protagonist remains silent, staring down his opponent with a cold look. Suddenly, a memory from the past flashes, and he remembers being hunted. He then gets angry, recalling how he was chased by that creature for a decade. Bertel is shocked and doesn't understand what's happening to our hero. The two continue to fight with an intense exchange of sword strikes. The knight then screams in pain as he feels the force of our protagonist's attack. All of a sudden, our hero disarms Bertel, sending his sword flying through the air. He follows up with a powerful kick, sending him crashing to the ground. And with a serious look, our boy tells the knight to pick up his sword. Bertel gets back up and, with a yell, charges at our hero. Kamara watches the fight and notices that his brother's swordsmanship isn't bad. But to everyone's surprise, it was obvious that our hero was on a completely different level. Bertel screams in pain as he's thrown to the ground once again by our boy, and with his eyes glowing, our protagonist proves to be far stronger than his brother. With one last strike, he ends the fight, leaving Bertel collapsed on the ground. Suddenly, Kamara intervenes, saying that's enough and the fight is over. With a serious look, our protagonist asks. He thinks that's really sufficient. Kamara then tells him to step back, because the duel isn't over yet. And with his brother down, he declares the winner of the duel to be Sir Yan Yujin. But Bertel yells that he can still fight, and that he'll eliminate our hero with his own hands. Kamara tells him to stop, as the outcome of the fight has already been decided. He also tells him to act like a knight, and admit his crime in prison. However, Bertel snaps, screaming that he did nothing wrong to our protagonist. With his sword in hand, he screams our hero's name with pure hatred. He then blames him, saying that if he hadn't been there, none of this would have happened, and that he never would have suffered this humiliation if he'd never shown up. Our protagonist then stares him down, and a blue light glows in his eyes. Suddenly, Bertel's body stops moving, and he doesn't understand why. He wonders why his body won't obey him, and what's going on. The knight's armor then begins to crumble, and he starts to panic, and our hero says he should have taken the last chance his brother gave him. With a final blow, our protagonist finishes Bertel once and for all. Partek and Rabin remain silent, watching the scene without a word. Our hero then turns and walks toward the exit of the castle courtyard, and with a look of sadness, Kamara watches his brother's body lying on the ground. Back in the city, Miriam complains that our hero wasted his first vampire. Our boy asks what she means, and she says he used him and then tossed him aside. But our hero explains that the man was weak-willed and wouldn't have been able to handle it, and that if he had kept him around, the fact that he become a vampire would have been discovered. Our hero then says he doesn't seem like the type to spare those who show their fangs. Miriam calls him cold and says vampires are supposed to have countless slaves. Our boy thinks that turning weaklings into vampires is just more work than it's worth, and if there were someone he genuinely liked, he might consider turning them. Suddenly, someone shouts that a huge commotion has started with Lord Galperdick. Our protagonist then shows up at the guild, and Priscilla is surprised to see him. Billmore greets him and says he heard about the successful dungeon subjugation. Without wasting any time, our hero asks what happened to Lord Galperdick. Priscilla goes quiet and looks at him with a very serious expression. She explains that 2 weeks ago, the knight took part in a subjugation, and that he disappeared alone in a labyrinth within Count Evergrow's territory. Our protagonist then heads to the location to investigate what happened. With a determined look, he prepares to search for his old comrade. Once in the city, he enters a mansion and is greeted by a nobleman. The man introduces himself as Lord Jebin and welcomes our hero. Our boy greets him, and the Lord invites him in to talk. Jebin is the eldest son of the Evergrow family and seems quite friendly. He then explains that Galperdick's greed led him to enter the upper levels alone. Our hero repeats his words with a very suspicious look. Jebin confirms it, saying that unfortunately, they haven't touched that place in over 100 years. Jebin explains that the master of the labyrinth, who rules the place, resides there. Suddenly, another man appears and says Galperdick caused trouble for everyone. Jebin then introduces him as Sir Lujits, a knight from his domain. The man greets our hero and says he heard about their duel, and with a smile, he reveals that the two of them have something interesting in common, because he was the winner of the family tournament and defeated Galperdick as well. Jebin then apologizes and says this just shows how valuable the knight was. He then asks if our hero and the knight shared a deep friendship. Our protagonist confirms it with a cold look, and Miriam gets annoyed with him. Jebin says he will give our hero his full support for coming all this way for a friend, and he explains that if the search goes on for more than a month, they will declare him deceased. He also reveals that 3 weeks have already passed, and there's no hope left. Our protagonist then stares at the Lord with a serious and determined look, and without wasting time, he gets up to leave for the labyrinth immediately. Jevon then says he'll have a subjugation party ready in 3 days, and asks our hero to rest and recover from his long journey. Our protagonist thanks him and says there's one more thing he needs, and that they've hired a mage, and will bring her along to help with the search. Back in the city, Miriam complains that our hero is huge and looks goofy. She also gets annoyed with Jabin, saying he has no manners at all. Our hero then thinks that there's more than one thing that's fishy about that story. He remembers that Galperdick was about to receive a title and had no reason to take such a risk. And with a smile, the knight had even invited him to come along and make a good impression. Our protagonist doesn't understand the change of plans or why he was being tested again. He knows the knight wasn't the type to risk it, all for a moment of greed. Suddenly, a man shouts that the Messiah is coming, getting everyone's attention. He says the goddess of victory will descend to destroy the land as the prophecy says, and that the disaster has already begun, with animals dropping dead near the labyrinth. Miriam then realizes they're talking about our hero and gets confused. The man then yells for everyone to offer flesh and blood as a sacrifice, and that if they do, the Messiah will descend and save the tainted land. Miriam gets annoyed by the scene, and our hero says the city feels off. A young man then hands him a flyer and tells him to believe, because the gods are angry. Our protagonist then reads about the dying animals and the crumbling labyrinth. He wonders if it's the work of monsters, and why Galperdick went in alone. Without wasting time, he tells Miriam they're heading to the labyrinth right now. He then finds a mage and says that 3 days is too long and they'll go alone. Suddenly, the mage says she never thought she'd see a vampire in a place like this. Our hero is shocked and wonders how she figured out his true identity, and with a smile, the mage reveals that vampires were hunted to extinction. The mage taunts him further, saying he's just walking around in broad daylight. Our hero then gets angry and grabs the mage by the throat, hard. Meanwhile, the man continues to shout that the Messiah is coming. With a cry of pain, the mage feels our protagonist's strength. With his red eyes, our hero asks how she recognized him so quickly, and he threatens her, saying he'll snap her neck if she doesn't answer. The mage then stammers that she'll talk but needs him to let her go. With difficulty, she reveals it was because of our hero's blood shadow. Miriam then says the name sounds familiar and seems to remember something. Suddenly, the fairy screams as she realizes where she knows that name from. Desperate, she yells for our hero to stop and not to eliminate the mage, because she is a mage and is part of the Blood Shadow School. She explains that they are a group of mages who have served vampires for generations. With the force of his grip, the mage ends up passing out in his arms. Waking up, she complains that she can't answer if he doesn't let go. Our hero then apologizes, and Miriam says he's starting to talk like a villain. The mage then formally introduces herself as Serenoa Romari of the Shadow School, and that because of the school's nature, they can sense the presence of a vampire. She also reveals she was looking for him at the request of the young master, Jebin, and angrily, our hero thinks he's going to sue Galperdick's mouth shut when he finds him. Sereno then reveals she was in the subjugation party when Galperdick vanished. Our hero asks for more details, and she explains she needed monster spoils. So she signed up for the subjugation of the Evergrow Count's labyrinth, and since the place was known for being treacherous, everyone was moving forward with confidence. Suddenly, an earthquake shook the labyrinth, and the ground began to tremble. The floor then collapsed, and she almost fell, but someone grabbed her at the last second. It was Sir Galperdick, who was guarding the rear of the group at that moment. He saved her but ended up falling into the abyss in her place, into the darkness. After escaping, she heard the others blaming the knight for the earthquake, saying that he opened the gate to the upper levels, causing the whole disaster. Serenoa says she thought about telling him the truth since he was his friend. Our protagonist then realizes the story is different from what Jebin told him, and he wonders if the Lord lied or if he got false information from someone. Suddenly, Serenoa reveals she saw something strange in that moment of chaos, and that at the bottom of the abyss where the knight fell, she saw a huge eye drawn there. Our hero is surprised, and she confirms that it was indeed an eye. She also reminds him of the cultists who were handing out flyers in the square, and that the image on the flyer was the same one she saw at the bottom of the abyss. Meanwhile, in a dark place, the cultists worship the image of the giant eye, and one of them says that the Messiah, who will lead them to salvation, will soon awaken. At the entrance of the labyrinth, one of the men reports that the provisions are stocked. Lujits then asks how he feels about reuniting with his comrade. Our hero replies that he just hopes he doesn't have to carry a body back. The knight then says Galperdick isn't the type to go down easily. He even laughs and says our protagonist has a lot of faith in his friend. Our hero then thinks that he wanted to enter the labyrinth sooner, but he needed to keep an eye on that scumbag Lujits, just in case. He knows the knight survived for 3 weeks and can last another 3 days. Suddenly, a group of Templars appears and greets our hero. They introduce themselves as Templars from the monastery of House Evergrow and say it's an honor to serve alongside such a pious knight. Marianne then has to hold back her laughter, hearing them call a vampire Bias. Lujits is surprised, as it's rare for Templars to take an interest in a knight, and with a smirk, he wonders if our protagonist is some kind of vampire paladin. At the entrance of the labyrinth, our hero calls Pardik over for a talk. They then set up camp, and our protagonist tells them not to let their guard down. Marianne is fascinated by the place, saying it's overflowing with water energy. Pardik then says the place is different and was designed for survival. Our hero thinks that if the worst happens, he could hide here to survive. Suddenly, Lujits appears and says it's the perfect place for scoundrels to hide. Lujits praises our hero, saying his skills are impressive. With a smile, he tells our protagonist not to be so impatient, and that the person he needs to trust most right now is himself. Our hero then says that for a mapped-out place, they're having a lot of casualties. Lujits laughs and says they are merely sacrifices offered to the labyrinth. Suddenly, our protagonist's eyes start glowing red, and to everyone's surprise, a strong earthquake shakes the entire structure. Lujits yells for everyone to hold on, as the labyrinth structure is changing, and with a smirk, he says the place where Galperdick fell is right here. He then reveals that this zone, where the walls shift constantly, is also the shortcut to the upper levels they were looking for. Serenoa then says that this earthquake is the same as before. Lujits then stops in one spot, and our hero asks where the shortcut is. With a malicious grin, the knight says the shortcut is right where he's standing. Our protagonist then realizes it's a trap and braces for the worst. Suddenly, enormous gears emerge and change the entire layout of the place. Our hero then holds onto to avoid falling into the dark abyss of the cavern, and realizes it wasn't a natural earthquake, and that it was all a trap. Sereno then calls out to him and points at something in the middle of the darkness, and with his red eyes, he stares at what's coming towards them. To his astonishment, he finds Galperdick tied up and severely injured. Without a second thought, our protagonist rushes forward to save his friend. He gets closer and realizes the severity of the knight's injuries. Upon touching his face, our hero senses that something is very wrong, and with his red eyes, he realizes the knight is still alive. Suddenly, Marianne warns him that something feels off about this place. The fairy says she felt a different presence coming from beneath the cavern floor. A strong gust of wind then starts blowing from an unknown direction, and everyone wonders where that powerful wind is coming from. From the depths of the abyss, a red light emerges, illuminating the darkness, and with its glowing eyes, a giant creature begins to rise. The monster reveals itself with an enormous body and purple flames all over, and before them appears the fearsome Minotaur, the master of this labyrinth. Sereno then screams in terror, and our hero tells her to protect the knight. The Minotaur then attacks with full force, and our protagonist charges into battle. With a leap, he dodges the blow and prepares to attack the creature, and with his sword in hand, he readies himself to face the giant monster. Our hero then unleashes all his power, and a red light emanates from his body. Sereno screams in fear upon seeing the strength of our protagonist's attack. The creature then attacks him with its claws and prepares for another strike. With its axe in hand, the Minotaur gets ready to attack with everything it's got. Our hero then asks what it's doing and braces for the worst. A red light then glows, and the creature launches a powerful attack. The energy wave destroys everything and sends our protagonist and the knight flying. Galperdick is then thrown into the air, and our hero is shocked by the scene. Without a second thought, he lunges forward to try and save his friend from the fall. He reaches out his hand, but can't get to him in time to save him. Desperate, our protagonist screams his friend's name as he falls. Suddenly, he's stopped by a spell and doesn't understand what happened. With his eyes glowing, our hero wonders what the meaning of this is. Sereno then warns him that the monster is a high-level Minotaur, and that even a vampire would be eliminated if they faced it head-on. With a look of rage, our hero glares at her with his sharp fangs showing. With her dagger ready, she prepares herself, and the two face off with serious expressions. Our protagonist then says she's crossed the line and calls her by her name. Sereno apologizes, saying she couldn't just watch a vampire jump to his doom, and that attacking a Minotaur head-on offers a minimal chance of victory. She adds that if he wants to save the knight, he needs to keep a cool head. The mage wonders if the labyrinth is even big enough to house a Minotaur, and with that, our hero stares at a blue light that appears on the wall. Lujits then says he didn't know the mage was capable of using earth magic. He adds that she survived thanks to Galperdick, and that he's a weirdo. Sereno then glares at him with rage and calls out his name with pure hatred. She remembers that it all happened so fast and feels guilty about what occurred. With a look of rage, our hero realizes that he was the one to blame for everything, and that he was the one who turned Galperdick into what he is now. Lujits then says he just brought the friend for the Lord to see how much he loves him. He then grabs our protagonist and calls him rude for accusing him. Our hero then senses a strange aura and realizes something is wrong. With his red eyes, he prepares to attack the knight with everything he's got. Our protagonist then attacks him, and a strange tattoo glows on Lujits' hand. Sereno then realizes that monstrous strength isn't really his, and a purple aura emanates from the knight's body as he uses an inherited power. She explains that the crest grants inherited power and is a forbidden magic, because the magic began to transfer power from non-human beings to humans. Lujits says, forbidden magic is just wordplay by those who want to monopolize power, and that they are the chosen ones to survive when despair comes to the world. Our hero then says he stole someone else's power to defeat Galperdick, and that after that, he even bragged as if the skill was his own. With a malicious grin, our protagonist says he'll first make him realize his place. The two then clash, and a red aura emanates from our hero's body. The two energies then collide, and a massive explosion rocks the place. Sereno is impressed by the power and wonders if a normal vampire could emit that. With a smirk, Lujits says he's not the only one who was hiding his power, and with a powerful punch, he attacks our protagonist with everything he has. Our hero then retaliates, and a purple aura emanates from his body during the fight. The knight warns that he has no intention of holding back in this battle, and with the force of the blow, Sereno is thrown far away, screaming in pain. Lujits then says all the labyrinth's traps have now been exposed, and with a wicked smile, he tells our protagonist to fall in silence. Our hero then shouts Sereno's name and prepares for the worst. The mage then uses her magic and creates a shield to protect our protagonist. Lujits then stares down our hero with a serious and determined look, and with his red eyes, our boy gets ready for the final showdown. The knight then hides behind a wall and watches our hero. Suddenly, he attacks with his sword, striking our protagonist in the face. With a cold gaze, Lujits continues to attack without any mercy, and with his sword in hand, he prepares for the final blow against our hero. The knight thinks that he'd heard rumors of his strength, but it surpassed his expectations. Smirking, he admits that using Galperdick as bait was the right choice. With a malicious grin, Lujits says the final sacrifice will be offered. Suddenly, Sereno's magic circle shatters, and she screams in pain. The mage then warns that the magic circle won't work here anymore. Sereno then asks where our hero is going, but he ignores her. The mage then feels guilty and wonders why she ever got involved in this. Scared, she wonders what kind of horrible inferno this place is. and even thinks she should have pretended not to know and run far away. Suddenly, she sees our hero holding Galperdek in his arms. Our protagonist is carrying the knight, who is all beaten up and unconscious. He then asks the mage if she can save his friend's life. Our hero glares at Serenoa and says that wasn't an answer to his question. Scared, the mage stays silent, not knowing what to say to him. She then says she'll do her best and uses her magic to heal him. Suddenly, Miriam appears and warns that there's no way out of this place. She says the place seems like the end of the labyrinth, an isolated boss room. The fairy says that's what she wanted to warn him about earlier, because she can't control anything here, even as a water spirit, and that the pool of blood has a different and strange consistency. Our protagonist then stares at the pool with a serious and suspicious look, and wonders if those eyes are what the mage saw at the bottom of the abyss. Our hero then asks why she can't control the pool of blood. Suddenly, a blood monster begins to form from the pool on the ground. The creature then rises and stares at our protagonist with an empty gaze. And to everyone's surprise, the Minotaur also regenerates and gets back on its feet. Our hero then tells Miriam to find an opening for them to escape. He faces the giant monster and prepares for the battle to come. Serenoa then continues to heal Galperdek, who is still unconscious. With his red eyes, our protagonist decides he needs to immobilize the monster. With his sword in hand, he charges and attacks the creature with everything he's got. Our hero then uses his ability, and a series of red claws appear. The attack hits the Minotaur dead on, but it doesn't seem to feel a thing. Our protagonist then continues to attack with all his strength and power. He uses his ability again, attacking the monster with claws of blood. Suddenly, his sword breaks, and he's shocked by the enemy's resilience. With a serious look, our hero clutches the broken blade in his hand. The creature then prepares to attack, and a yellow light glows in its mouth. With a swift movement, our protagonist dodges the energy blast, and with a leap, he closes in on the monster for a close quarters attack. Our hero then lands a powerful punch on the giant creature's face. And with another leap, he prepares to attack the Minotaur with all he's got. He then realizes that a normal sword can't even scratch the monster, and with his hand glowing red, he decides he'll make do with what he has. He thus creates a new blade of blood and prepares for combat. With his new weapon in hand, our protagonist faces the creature seriously. He then charges and uses a blood spear to attack the Minotaur. With a quick move, he dodges an attack and prepares to counter. He then continues to fight, exchanging a series of blows with the creature. With his fangs bared, our hero attacks the monster with everything he's got, but the Minotaur hits him with a punch, sending him crashing into the wall. The creature then attacks with its weapon, and the floor shatters from the impact. Our protagonist is thrown far away and slams into the cavern wall. With a determined look, he gets ready for round 2 of the fight. Serenoa then tries to wake up Galperdek, who remains unconscious on the floor, and asks him to wake up because his friend is in danger and needs help. Our hero then realizes the mage was right and that he can't win because the high-level monster is on a completely different level of strength. Suddenly, the creature glares at him with a look of pure evil and gets ready. Our protagonist then curses and braces himself for the monster's final attack. With all his power, he uses his ability, and a series of claws emerge. He's caught by the enemy's blow, which riddles him with holes. Serenoa then screams our hero's name and prepares for the worst. All battered, our protagonist glares at the monster with a look of rage. He then remembers the powerlessness he felt for over a decade. With his blood claws, he attacks the Minotaur with everything he's got. But he wonders why he's feeling more pain than before. And with a scream of agony, our hero is slammed onto the cavern floor. Beaten down, he prepares for the giant creature's final blow. Lying on the ground, our protagonist watches the scene with an empty gaze and wonders why he's fighting so hard to save his friend. Galperdek then wakes up and sees our hero down and covered in wounds. With a look of surprise, he stares at our protagonist, completely bewildered, and wonders why he is risking so much to save him.